Hi everyone, back to Evermore YouTube channel. It's Chris back with my rant stroke thought of the day, and it's all about Eddie Howe, the manager. Started to think a little bit more about this actually, certainly off the back of his press conference pre-Fulham today. He was asked obviously about all the players potentially being sold and leaving the club. He had a few things to say, some positive, some cryptic, some not so good sounding. So I'm just going to give you my kind of tuppence on that really. So starting with Kieran Trippier. He basically said that everybody in the club was aligned to say that accepting an offer of 13 million for Trippier really looked like good value on paper, but for what he's worth to the club didn't make sense. So that's nice to hear that other people in the club were on the same page as Eddie Howe when it came to Kieran Trippier. But it came to Joe Linton and Callum Wilson less so. He obviously tried to be a bit tongue-in-cheek with Callum Wilson's very cryptic post about the sun and the moon and everything else, and the pictures of him in a training top. Not quite sure what that means. Some people thought it means he's back for Fulham, which I think Eddie said he was close, but didn't make it sound like he was back for Fulham. Maybe back for Villa, possibly, if he's still a Newcastle player. And then other people try to look at it as if, that's Callum Wilson away. He's been linked to loads of football clubs all over the place. Atletico Madrid, AC Milan, apparently now Chelsea, Manchester United, 18 million quid. Now, before I get into this, if you can get 18 million quid for a player who is only fit 40% or 60% of the season, misses 40%. Yes, when he's fit, he scores. He's 31 years old now. If you can get 18 million for him, then I don't think that's a bad deal. Don't sell him to Chelsea or Manchester United and strengthen your fucking opposition. But if you can get a good deal for him, it's not a bad deal. However, if you don't replace him with equal quality of a striker that can do what Callum Wilson does or near as damn it and is fitter more, and could be good backup to Alexander Isak, then you're leaving the squad short. I mean, if anything, we need a third striker because Isak isn't without his injury problems, and certainly Callum has his injury problems. But what Eddie Howe said about Callum Wilson was very cryptic. He said he's gone deep there, and he kind of chuckled about it. But then he said that every conversation he's had with Callum Wilson, Callum's 100% committed to the cause, but certain things are out of his control. And that kind of makes me start to think about what's going on behind the scenes. I'm not entirely sure that everything is simpatico between Eddie Howe and Dan Ashworth, if I'm brutally honest with you. I'm not trying to cause shit or say ITKs. We don't do that here. It's just a feeling that I've got. I just feel like the winds have changed a little bit, in behind the scenes of Newcastle United. He was asked about Calvin Phillips as well. He said we had to step away from that for financial reasons. Now, listen, that could just be as simple and as pure as City were taking a piss because they wanted to put a Newcastle tax on. We said no, and we walked away from it. But I really genuinely think that Eddie Howe wanted Calvin Phillips. I think he wanted him in the summer, didn't get him. And I think he wanted him in January and got him. So I think he's getting quite frustrated as Eddie Howe by the looks of it. Now, if we end this window with no first team additions, and the only thing we have is a kid from Man City who isn't going to play in the first team, which Eddie pretty much confirmed today, but that's not a very good window. And if we lose a Callum Wilson or a Miggy Almiron, who's apparently over in the RVI, I don't know if it's an injury or a medical, who knows. People are putting two and two together saying Morgan Gibbs-White isn't in the Nottingham Forest squad, so there's something happening there. Now, if we end this transfer window with Gibbs-White coming to replace Miggy, that's an upgrade. And then if you possibly have another centre-forward coming in, whoever it may be, Hugo Ekitike, or somebody else, and you sell Wilson, then that's not a bad window. But we're not stronger as a squad in terms of depth and numbers. We've just literally replaced two gone out, two gone in, with decent players. So that's not particularly good either. Now, this going back to my point about Eddie and Ashworth, if you look at the summer transfer window, a lot of people are saying it wasn't very good. Journalists, fans, fan-led media, in general. Now, if you look at the window, it's almost a 50-50 split in the summer. So Sandro Tonali and Harvey Barnes, to me, stink of first-team signings, Eddie Howe type players. He said, yes, I want those two players. The other two players, Dan Ashworth signings, two players for the future, which I don't think that you really needed. Livramento, yes, has been class, and that's been a kind of pleasant surprise that he has been capable of stepping into the first team and doing a more than capable job. But it's pretty clear that Eddie Howe didn't want Lewis Hall. That's pretty clear to me. But Dan Ashworth did. Now, that to me worries me a little bit. That is it a shootout between Howe and Ashworth and who gets their own way? Now, if Man U have been sniffing around Ashworth, that tells me that maybe Ashworth's been frustrated with his relationship with Howe, and possibly Man United have seen an in there and tried their best. Now, if the club are standing by Ashworth and saying, no, you're our guy, we back you, are they drawing lines between Ashworth and Howe, which is a dangerous game, because on paper, there's only one of them that is more important to the club right now, and that's Eddie Howe. He's the manager who saved us from relegation. He's the manager who took us to the Champions League. He's the manager who's turned players like Joe Linton, Sean Longstaff, Miggy Almiron, Dan Burn into Champions League players. that guy has performed miracles at this football club. And Dan Ashworth, yes, maybe building for the future. And I know a lot of people say that's a good idea, and it is a good idea. You want to have a good youth academy coming through, players you can play in the cup games, and and players in the future you can sell and bank profit, like Cole Palmer at City, and Mason Mount at Chelsea, and all these kind of things. That's a really good idea. But in the here and now, this squad needs additions, it needs new bodies, it needs new faces, it needs people to put pressure on other people for their positions to raise their game, but it needs other options off the bench, because our injury crisis has been horrific this season. And yes, you can't legislate for that, but in the January transfer window, you can try to fix it by adding 2 or 3 or 4 players in. And we just haven't done that at all. So this is what's concerning me a little bit here. And I really hope that it isn't the case. And I really hope that Ashworth and Howe are still very much on the same page. Ashworth is off doing his thing to grow the future of the club, and Howe is still getting back for the present. We'll see when this window ends if Howe is being backed. And the other reason that makes me concerned a little bit about what's going on with Howe is, these are key players, key personnel. Joe Linton was another one, or Joe Linton, as we've been told to call him now, thanks to the football correspondents in South America. He was mentioned in the press conference too, and Eddie Howard said he wants to keep him. He loves him as a player, loves him as a person, but the player has to be happy with all things attached to the contract in the football club, and right now that's not the case. And he said it is a possibility that Joe Linton could be sold in the summer. Now, that doesn't sound like a manager who wants to lose that player. Now, this could just be brinkmanship in terms of Joe Linton trying to get the best deal he can. Fair play to him and his agent and everything else as well. But Eddie Howe doesn't sound like the usual kind of articulate, snappy, sharp, smiley Eddie Howe that we've become accustomed to. So that concerns me a little bit there. His key kind of lieutenants, if you will, Trippier, Wilson, even Almiron, if you want to call him that as well. He's tried and tested player, Joe Linton. These are players that Eddie Howe didn't want to sell, didn't want to get rid of, even Jamal Lascelles, and they've all been linked with moves away from the football club. So I just really hope that there isn't something going on behind the scenes, of a shootout between Ashworth and Howe, but you can't help but to wonder. Now, coming back to the end of this window, I'm not sure there's going to be much activity. We've got Fulham on Saturday and then Villa on Tuesday. Whatever is going to happen needs to really happen over the next 2 or 3 days, and with 2 games in between, I'm just not sure that it is going to happen. And if we end this window, as I said, with just a kid from City, it ain't good enough, really. It really, really isn't. But let us know in the comments below what you guys think about the end of this window. Do you think something's going to happen? There's a lot of speculation going on about, the chairman coming from Saudi and all this other stuff, and the infamous Anik Hall meetings in Anik Castle. Now, we don't know what's going on in terms of signings or anything else, whatever. Is it players leaving? Is it players coming? Who knows? But this squad definitely needs new faces, new bodies before February 1st, just to have one last push, to try and get us as high up the league as we possibly can, and maybe get us a cup in the bank as well. It's nice to see Barnes and Willock with their boots back on, but they need to stay fit. They haven't managed to do it all season. So yeah, there's a long way to go. Be really interested to see how this window ends. Let us know in the comments below what you guys think. Do you think about Eddie Howe and Ashworth as well? Do you think something's going on there, or do you think everything's all still kind of simpatico between the two? Would love to hear what you have to say. Let's engage in football conversations, not abuse. Smash a comment underneath, like and subscribe, help the channel grow. It's all free content. If you want to add a little bit in and help me and Mark bringing this great content, be a member. It's less than £2 a month, so it's less than a pint of lager in most places. So well worth it to be a member and get early access to these videos. Have a great weekend wherever you are. We'll be back for post-match against Fulham, and we'll catch you later. Cheers, bye.